Thank you so much. Yeah, let's go through this really quickly. So, it's going to be a little bit of an intro of what we do, some of our boats, what we use, some of the actual grants to get people in that don't technically relate to Alaska, but there is a lot of dollars that lives up in the Great Northwest that can help lower the barrier to entry and also get these specific products out for their quietness and their pollution resistant and also for preventing some of the diesel deafness that happens with a lot of folks that are using boats every day. So again, like it's a very crucial part of the nation's infrastructure. Outboards, they're great because you can pull them out of the water quickly, they're easy to work on, etc. And then knowing that we've actually designed the first outboard motor that's specifically for commercial and workboat world in mind. So it's not just trying to make a recreational boat that you can take out skiing with your friends. It's about trying to make this land in the actual workboat world. um, Coming from, I used to be a contractor and whatnot, looking more at the picture of not just a marketing piece, but knowing that someone might pull up in a Cummins turbo diesel and park their car or truck and then go down to the boat. And it's amazing if it's working, but they don't really care if it's gas or if it's electric. They just want it to work. And these use cases are for specific, these electric motors are significantly better, and less expensive in the long run, the return on investment is. So again, like here's, you know, ICE internal combustion outboard disadvantages would be like, you're looking at annual full fuel bills of up to 175K per vessel, 40% of operation expenses. Again, frequent maintenance of 2K every 300 hours or every 6 weeks. 30K motors replaced every few years just because of use. Environmental impacts up to 200 millitons of megatons, sorry, of CO2 per vessel and noise affected operations, hearing, and wildlife. And lastly is, frequent failures put people at risk and fuel is flammable. There's 200 accidents annually. And then a little bit more about the advantages is that, it's economical. It's up to 40% less. That's total cost of operation is TCO. Payback within 3 years, incentive accelerate that same payback. I'll talk a little bit about the cost parity in California with CARB, which is the California Air Resource Board, and how this actual program is starting to get spread across. Actually, they're trying to pull it into Washington State and up into Canada and also into Maine on the other side of our great nation. Environmentally friendly, no fumes or oil spills. It's much less quiet. It's kind of mind-boggling. And then easy maintenance. So every 1,000 hour, it just needs to be pulled out, and the bottom of the motor needs to be re-oiled. And you can do that without removing it from the water. So that's really, really great. And then again, safety, fewer moving parts, DNF certified batteries, which means they're fully submersible in water, and instant torque delivers quick acceleration. So currently we're working with these three, and actually have a couple more boat makers actually out of Halifax that we're working with that will be completed here in the next about 2 months. Silverback, they're out of Tacoma, Washington. Ghostworks, they're out of Michigan. And then Cat, which is a hydrofoiling cat, is actually something we're going to be licensing and building out of here in Portland, or the other option is actually out of Salt Lake City. So we've got the plans, everything, licensing from it. It's a foil cat, so it actually allows for super efficient and effective water movement with an EV motor. So you can get a lot more range, which is great. And so we talked a little bit about it before. So CARB, and we call it CORE, which is the Clean Off-Road Equipment Vouchers. So CORE. We have these current boats and our motor in the program that's out of California. And this is something that we're helping push to spread across the United States as well. So what they do is that they actually cover the difference between an internal combustion motor and something that would be zero emission. So if that's hydrogen or EV or anything else along those lines, they will cover the difference in the cost. So imagine stepping into a work boat and jumping into an electric motor, which is going to be more pricey, like I mentioned, $95,000 a motor, which is a pretty big sticker shock, but you're also buying 7+ years worth of gas. But knowing that they'll cover the difference. So if you're looking at that 300 horsepower ox diesel, or you're looking at a Mercury or something like that, it'll cover that difference of say $35,000 to that $95,000. You'll get a payback of up to $1 million, which is pretty insane. When you're talking that big, you're talking about the gigantic fuel cell build outs for not boats but ships. But it's a really, really amazing program, and we're hoping to spread the uh, the word around more, and hopefully even up in Alaska we can get this rolling as well. So here's a quick breakdown of what our motors actually are. So they're 300 horsepower at peak, 150 horsepower continuous. They have 500 newton meters of torque with a 63 kilowatt battery pack. So we have options of doing a one and one, so one battery, one motor, two batteries, one motor, or two batteries and two motors. So, and we actually are working on other ones that will have close to six for some ferries that we're currently bidding on right now, which is awesome. Again, the weight of the motor lifts about a little bit lighter than an actual internal combustion motor at 375 pounds. But you start talking about lithium and the density of that metal, um, it's 800 pounds per battery pack. So knowing that we work with the actual naval architects and boat makers to ensure where the batteries are going to live, to make sure it's equalized on the boat. It's not all sitting in the back, so you're not doing a wheelie all the way through the water or not being able to get onto plane effectively. Um, Again, with the amount of torque that these motors have, if you've ever been in an EV vehicle, you're up and out of the hole and planing in within seconds. It's just direct torque, and you're up and out, and it's pretty impressive. And having other people that have been on the boat that are used to not having that much instant torque or a lag or a delay on getting up to the horsepower needed is pretty cool. Now, through this conversation, what I was tasked with to have is to know the complications of introducing EV. It's a new technology into the workboat world and the commercial world. So I've already talked about it, the barrier to entry and the cost. Coming from someone that does sales, you're not supposed to talk about how it's expensive, but it is initially off the bat. It's expensive, but there's a lot of credits and a lot of other ways that to get dollars from the state or government or county or city to help electrify parts of these workboats. Second, which we talked about before we started the recording, is infrastructure. Some of these smaller ports, um, for electricity and running a DC charger, which you don't need a DC charger, which would be a full three-phase. It's a lot of power that comes down. The cool thing about it is that it charges these batteries in 45 minutes, but it's pulling a lot of energy off the grid. And to know that those are going to be specific use cases, more for the ferries, or someone's running a scuba diving operation, or if you're running a whale watching operation, having multiple boats that are electric, that while one group is out, the other one is charging. That's where the DC charger three-phase makes sense. That's a level three charger, but a level two charger, you're looking at much lower ampage. You can run 240, that most shore power has 240, that you can actually jump up to 50 amps through a little mechanism that we have that comes with the boat. And then that will allow you to recharge. This boat we're looking at here is that's dual motor, dual battery, and it can recharge that in about 7 hours. And then if you have your normal home charger, say if you had an EV vehicle at your house, a lot of those are AC to DC converters. And those in those circumstances, depends on how low the battery is, can take much longer. You're looking at like 12 hours to 15 hours. Um, so there is a power concern that comes into play, and understanding, some of these smaller places that might be using these boats in Alaska for, mariculture, or if it's fishing, I mean, low level fishing that doesn't go out, 60 miles, or any type of dredge or tug support, um, you're gonna there's got to be an offset, if that's, with clouds and whatnot, it still works with solar, but we haven't really dipped our toe too into it too far into it because we don't build the infrastructure. It's going to be a little bit of the chicken or egg conversation to start, just because there's going to be we're going to have a lot more boats ready before you get permits passed and you can pull big power from the road down to the actual ports or marinas or wherever you're going to be mooring the boats, etc. But we do have workarounds currently that will allow, especially if you're using these daily, but these will run for 8.5 hours and still have plenty of battery left. Again, the one way to describe these actual motors is that it's high torque, so you're out of the hole quickly. If you run it at low speeds, below 7 knots, it has very high endurance. If you're running these motors at, we've gotten it up to 40 knots, you're going to get about an hour, maybe 30 minutes out of the entire ride. So these, again, there's specific use cases for these. And then stepping into what that entails is range anxiety, a conversation we have constantly is range anxiety because no one wants to be dead in water with an electric boat. But we have all the ranging and stuff built out currently. And there's a governor that's in the system that's built into the console that allows you to have enough energy to limp back into the port. So, again, range anxiety happens even with gasoline motors. If you have a captain that is not managing the range and you're running out of gas constantly, you probably need a new captain. That's what I would say. But nonetheless, like the range anxiety happens no matter what. And another piece I didn't put on here is, the fire incidences. People are very concerned about fires on boats, especially with lithium batteries, because when they mix with water, certain types of lithium actually it is an igniter of the actual lithium battery. But it's the same circumstance again, it's a new technology. It's easy to point out things that are wrong. What happens if you have a fire on a normal boat? You try to put it out, and if you can't, you abandon ship. So it's the same kind of thing with an EV motor. We have a lot of different type of protections that are in place, be it as individual cells that are fully submersible in its own cooling liquid, and also isolated that if one was to catch fire, it turns off the power to the surrounding ones. So they have a really incredible process of protection for these things. Um, Again, another piece is mechanical adaptation. You have a compression motor mechanic or a combustion motor mechanic, one that works on diesel and one that works on gas, that have been doing these work on workboats for 40 years, and stepping in and introducing a much less moving parts electrical motor. There's going to be pushback of learning a new or adapting a new mechanical knowledge. Again, these have way less moving parts. I mean, by way, I mean there's maybe like four moving parts total. So again, it's much easier actually to work on, but it's also going to take training to upskill and teach these mechanics that are going to be on the boats or working on in the marinas or the ports to be able to work on these actual new EV motors. We've had a lot of questions about really warm water or really cold water. Will they work? Especially talking about Alaska, and they do. These actually, while they're plugged in during when they're actually charging, there's also a warmer that keeps, it's kind of like being in Alaska and having a radiator or a diesel warmer. It's the same kind of thing. When these are plugged into shore power, it's keeping the batteries at a certain temperature and warm and cold. So we have the conversation as well down in the Caribbean of people being like, is this water going to be too warm, etc. No, it has a full cooling unit that comes built in with the actual batteries, that runs off of a non-electrical glycol, or non-current raising glycol, and also using water to cool it as well. So those questions come into play. And then a couple more is, so new boat versus deletes. So retrofitting would be the deletes. So for us, we talk about deletes as coming in and like you have two gas tanks, and you just bought the boat 2 years ago and you want to go EV. For us currently, that's a little difficult just because everything is going to have to be a custom project. It's not a plug and play quite like a John boat or, even specific, a throw out to one of our not true competitors, but Torpedo. They make, if you need a 12 horsepower, John boat where you can throw a couple batteries in the back of the boat and scoot around as a little work skiff, they're perfect for that. Ours are going to be a lot, they're 300 horsepower, big batteries, etc. So working with a lot of boat companies where they're building the actual boats is really advantageous for us because we can go in, we can find out where we need to put these batteries. Again, like I mentioned before, they weigh 800 pounds. If you get two of them, you're at 1,600 pounds. And those need to be leveled out on a boat for buoyancy and getting on plane and stability. So getting new boats where we can step in, work with the boat maker or naval architect, find out exactly where the balance point of the boat is, and placing the batteries inside. So they're going to be able to work a lot better. And then with deletes, and retrofitting, eventually we're going to get to that point where we'll have kind of a plug and play piece, but it's not going to be with this big 300 horsepower motor. If we start tearing down to a 150, which would have 75 horsepower continuous, which has a definite use case, and things that are smaller than that, which will be in the next coming years, then we'll probably have a plug and play kind of uh, piece, but that's not currently what we're approaching. And then lastly is use cases. These are not going to be a deep sea fishing vessel. It's not going to be something you can go out 60 miles and come back 60 miles. Um, these are used for, marina patrol, a lot of surveying because the boat motors are quiet. So we've had a lot of pushes for survey boats, and we're actually in the process of building three of them currently. Not us, but we're working with a boat maker to build those. Um, Dredge support, looking at dive support as well, um, employee or worker transportation, all these other pieces that fall into play that have, these can run all day. We sent a boat over that had one battery and one motor to the New York Port Authority, which is they work on dredging and cleaning the Erie Canal so the boats can go up and down through that process. They do it every year. So they start north and then they'll work their way south. And once everything starts to thaw out, then their year is done. And then, like the next year, they go from south and work north. It's pretty interesting. They had our boat for 3 months, and, I mean, excuse my French, beat the crap out of it, which was great. They loved it. They were going 5 to 7 miles out to the dredge boat, with a full charge, and then would pull anchor, pull cable, move people around, at 3 to 5 to 6 knots, and be out there for 8.5 hours, and then come back, 20 knots to get out to the boat, which would be 5 to 7, or yeah, 5 to 7 miles out, go out and help for 8 hours, 8.5 hours, and then come back the additional, like, 7 miles and still have 35% battery left. So, again, like I said, it's high torque, it's really fast. If you're utilizing it in a trolling, like, low speed, it can run for days. So that's, again, use cases are specific. This isn't gonna fit every case. It's not gonna fit a gigantic, 150-foot fishing vessel. It's gonna be a tender that lives on maybe a vessel that size or things like that. So, um again, I'm gonna have more Q&As. This is just a thank you for everyone. We're here in Portland, Oregon, um, getting that boat out. This is one of the one we have right now. It's a 24-foot. You guys kind of saw it here. That's a 24-foot Grizzly. That is their work boat. And we've been taking people out on sea trials. We have another one that's a 21-foot. We got that Hysocat that's coming in 6 weeks. And then we have three other boats from there's Abco out of Halifax, um, Titan Boats out of Sydney, BC, and then I'm currently working with Duckworths as well, so they're out of Washington. So again, we have a lot of different use cases, different boats, different hull shapes that we're working with that all makes it uh, different for every different for every person that's going to be purchasing the boat. So again, leaving it open for some Q&A uh, of the fears or questions or anything you want to know about these boat motors. Um, it's the apprehension is there. It's a new technology, like I mentioned, and we're here to kind of educate and find out if they fit perfectly for whatever case is needed.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate that. Fritz, I see you're eager.
Chad, thank you for this. I'm curious. Uh, 300 horsepower when it's when you put the pedal to the metal, so to speak.
Yeah,
375 pounds. Does the 375 pounds include the batteries?
it does not. The batteries weigh 800 pounds apiece.
Okay. And that illustration you had of a you know I forgot what length that boat was, but what's the displacement on that? Actually,
Oh yeah,
let me just throw another question at you. Consider
yeah,
a
yeah.
32-foot Bristol Bay boat with a
Hmm.
displacement of oh, help me out here, Tav. Um, I'm trying to think of some. Now you're based in and around Seattle.
Yeah, we're in Portland, Oregon, so we're about
Oh, in
2 hours south.
Portland. Okay.
But we're in
Yeah.
Seattle a lot.
But you're probably familiar with the size of a typical Bristol Bay boat, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know the whole size and whole shape and everything like that.
Well, and given that in addition to propulsion, I know we have auxiliary systems, refrigeration equipment, and
Hmm.
being probably the main energy hog, I suppose. How would you envision this engine working in Bristol Bay boats, for instance? And I ask this because I have a Wegley displacement hull, and it goes with a approximately 375 horse engine. It goes 8 knots. Empty or full, it goes 8 knots. You know? And I could see that being, actually usable. As you said, the cost is a little frightening, um, but there are obvious advantages. But
Hmm.
how would you envision that thing, powering my fishing boat, for instance?
No, I think that's great. Again, to know, thanks for the question. To know that some of the use cases are going to be like a full fishing vessel, it's going to be really difficult just because, like, if you're charging out and you're going in the big Alaskan seas and you're going out, 60 to 100 miles at minimum, this is probably not going to be the right thing. It's more like when you're leaning into something that's that big. How big is like, what's the average size of like uh, a Bristol Bay boat? Probably what, like 50
Well,
foot, 48,
yeah,
50?
they're limited by
32.
law to 32 feet.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh.
So, and to know that again, for workboat based, not fishing boat based, it's really difficult. This is the kind of the pocket we live in. If, you know, it would be really heavy. You'd have to have probably 8 batteries on top of that thing to make it underneath that thing to make it work for a fishing vessel. And that's just going to take a lot of room. And it's just, again, not the use case that we have it for. So maybe something that would be working in the port for your boat and helping, pull the boat in and around, using it as like micro tug and things like that would be a perfect use case. But again, this is the pocket where we can't jump into a fishing vessel that's going to be going out deep, doing long haul or gill net or whatever you're going to be doing. Um,
Chad, can
that's
I
just
jump in
yeah,
here?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we have drifters and set netters, and one of the things that
Okay,
I talked about with Charles was that it did not seem to make a lot of sense for drift boats, which is the 32
yeah,
foot that Fritz is showing in his background picture.
yeah, yeah.
But it might
Love it.
make sense in certain set net situations. A lot like
Hmm.
people have a variety of uses for set net skiffs and different amounts that they go out for and different
Hmm.
amounts they come back for and if they put it on a trailer and take it to their home every night or whatever in
Hmm.
between tides, or if they pull it up to Ecock Beach or wherever. So we talked about that there might be an opportunity for stuff like that, or I think if if um if Mark was here, use up at Aleknagik on a skiff would be a perfect use for it. It's 20 minutes to get to his cabin, sits around for a few days, drive around, and then 20-minute drive back. So I think I was picturing it more for like skiff use up here
Mhm.
um, than drifters. Charles also talked about charge barges, which was a new
Yeah.
concept. Um, and yeah, it blew my mind to think about. I couldn't picture it, but yeah. Do you have any thoughts on a charge barge, Chad?
Oh, so let me give you guys a quick. So charge barges are going to be these again. They have bait barges. They have other things that all over the U.S. Um, and Canada. But knowing a charge barge is going to be something that would be out on the water, that would have a charging capabilities that you could set into different locations. So again, you could chain them all together. Being as like you could go out if you're out at a certain point, you can come back instead of coming all the way back into shore, having charge barges, which in my mind sounds freaking amazing. In actuality, it sounds really complicated. Um, I think that's probably what Charles would attest to as well. It's like it's a brilliant idea. Who's going to take that opportunity to chew that off? I don't really know. But it would be a perfect use for these electric motors to have a charge barge that floats out there that has the capabilities where you can pull up and do an instant charge if it's a DC power that's being laid down on the floor of the sea floor and coming up and out. Again, as we all know, laid cable and laid pipe can be terrifying and amazing at the same time if it gets caught on anchor, if it gets all these other pieces that come into play. That's why we have survey boats and things that make sure that they're buried or going around the right rocks or etc. But yeah, I mean I think that's way further down the line, Tav. And but I mean, again, it's amazing. The potential sounds amazing, but someone's got to step up and figure out how to do that when we can, offshore wind is, even still trying to get figured out, let alone having
Mhm.
something that's putting a bunch of power that would be out under the water into a charge barge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions from in here?
How many units do you guys have in deployment right now?
We have 3 in deployment. We've got oh my God, the Abco boat, the Hysacat, the Silver Ships, and the Director. So we have four other boats that'll be in play in the next 6 months. So one of those is going to be a survey boat that's based out of Port of Long Beach. Another one is going to be it's going to be an anacortes, and it's going to be a taxi boat that is going to be going around just passenger only, not vehicle. And the Abco boat is actually working with the Ocean Supercluster, which is kind of like, the Sea Grant. Um, it's a huge Canadian-based grant funding for electrification of a lot of their ports and a lot of their work boats that have the perfect use case. This Abco boat is out of Halifax. It's going to be um, two batteries, two motors, and it's going to go out to a lot of the oyster farmers that are out there. One of the outside of Alaska and coming down into the Salish Sea and everything that's here. Some of the biggest oyster production comes out of Halifax as well, and up there in Newfoundland. So they are going to bounce that boat around into a couple different oyster farmers, and just we're getting tracking information. They're getting power usage, like all these other type of like details. If you guys have ever worked on grants, it's not just like you get free money for nothing. They're trying to do test case, use case, and also getting actual empirical data back to justify the grant for the next year. So we're doing that with that boat out of Halifax, and that's going to be probably one of the first ones up and running on the East Coast outside of that I talked about NYPA earlier, the New York Port Authority. They are getting a boat back to them in April, so they're going to be beating up that actual white boat that I showed on my slideshow. They're going to be taking that boat, and it's more or less a lease to own program, and they're just going to be utilizing it for dredge support and passenger people and anchor pulling and all that other kind of stuff for the indefinite future. So
Yeah, I was just kind of curious, yeah, kind of what your primary use you've seen so far. You mentioned tenders, and I kind of imagine tenders would be a perfect use case because a lot of larger vessels will already have three-phase power available on board, and things like
exactly.
that. Everything's just going to be shore landings and support work and harbor.
Yeah,
You might.
a nice landing craft, especially for if it's science based. So we're working also with through that carbon core program I talked about. We're working with Scripps out of San Diego, the university down there that will from UCSD, their oceanography school that's down there. They're going to get a boat, which is pretty interesting. They have a pier. If you guys have ever seen Scripps, they have it's in La Jolla, and they don't have an actual like deep water port or marina in the area. So they have this huge pier that goes all the way out, and they drop their boats off the end into the water and pull them up, which is really interesting. But they have gigantic 440 power that's running down that whole thing. So they could run like two DC chargers to charge up these boaters, but in these batteries. But they're getting a little work skiff. It's called a Super Cub from Grizzly, and it's about 16 foot, 16 and a half foot. Exactly what you're talking about. It's going to be their little diving vessel. And they also have a gigantic, huge, I think it's a 190-foot ship that they've been talking about actually getting another one again for a tender that would go on that boat because it's perfect for that. Like you said, it's got three-phase on the boat, on that ship. They can take it off if that's them going around, one, doing maintenance around the boat, two, doing short runs and everything like that. It's a great idea.
I have more questions if no one else does. Yeah, so
I'm here.
we had a presentation last year. Chandler Kemp, who we were talking about earlier, co-presented USDA about the REAP program, Renewable Energy for America program. Do you know about this USDA program?
I know a little bit about it, but Charles was definitely my counterpart was definitely more versed on it. We had talked
Okay.
about it a little bit. I need to, I mean, have you checked on it lately to see if it's actually still a
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask about A,
organization?
distance, and B, would it work for this? Because we had them present, specifically for commercial fishing boats,
Mhm.
like Fritz was talking about, the drifters and how we could use the REAP, which is a 50% offset that they'll pay back for showing that your vessel upgrade is decreasing your carbon footprint. So like
Oh, cool.
using an RSW system, refrigerated seawater system, doesn't necessarily make you think, oh, it's decreasing your carbon footprint, but because you're taking less trips to an ice barge, you're decreasing the amount of time that you're spending running your diesel engines and emitting that exhaust, and so they're able to use 50% off on an RSW system to put into their boat, even, and that's part of the renewable energy. So yeah, it just seems like this could work for people's uses. For again, I think skiffs are more aligned here, but
Yeah, 100%. I mean, skiffs are right. To hear from Fritz and to know that, like, yeah, I mean, it's just not going to be for a gigantic big sea faring vessel yet until technology gets better. It's going to be a nice working skiff that does everything you need again, the barrier to entry might be high to start, but knowing some of these programs that will give grant money to offset, not just in California, but like I mentioned before, the green out of Fairbanks. It is the Green Energy and Mariculture grant. So they're utilizing some of those dollars, um, and it's just trying to again right now it's just trying to find a way to get that in, or to know again that it is a large upfront cost, but knowing that there are credits, one, because it's electric, and two, that you're paying for 7+ years of gas. That's, and we know how much maritime gas costs in comparison to getting it from your pump. I can only imagine how much gas costs up there. Although you have a lot of gas, you have a lot of oil, so maybe it is cheap. I grew up in Texas, so like,
To get refined in Washington State and come back up. So it's not cheap here. It goes to Washington,
really,
refined, comes back up.
Yeah, in
So,
Anacortes, actually, yeah.
no way. I did
so
not
yeah,
know
that's
that.
a common misconception about our fuel here. Um,
Wow.
I,
Oh,
I did
wow.
have another question though. So I think of this as like, I went on a whale watching trip in Juneau and they had 450 horsepower outboards on their whale watching boat. Just so if something happened to one of them, they could swap it out and put another one on. And they always had like two going at all times, right? Sometimes three if they really wanted to kick it.
Mhm.
Um, but if like you're talking about the lower volume as they get closer to whales, the quieter engines seems like it would be a lot more desirable for that situation. And having 8 hours of trolling speeds or whatever, they're only during the daytime, so that could work.
Yeah.
Is there much interest by like whale watching to replace like one or two of those outboards with?
No, exactly. That's we're working with Prince of Wales. They're actually a pretty big, they're out of Canada, but out of the whole Victoria Island, or Vancouver Island area. And that's exactly, I talked with, again, with Angela from Fairbanks, and she was talking about, what there's this pros and cons. Like, well, what about the motor to warn them so pods don't get chopped up by the propeller? And then there's the other side of like, well, you can be really quiet so you can get closer to them. It's like, it was really interesting, the conversation we've had, because I've heard it both. But yeah, you nailed it. Like, it's like I said, you've been on the boat. You went on the just the single, right? Had the single motor, single battery. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
So this other one is a double double, and it's still just as quiet. And I think that opportunity is massive. Again, whale watching, surveying is huge because of the sonar bounce back. We're working Norbit, which is a gigantic, I don't know if you guys know what Norbit is, but they're a gigantic sonar company that does, they're like on the bleeding edge of sonar. They're able to go through different sediment levels and take snapshots the size of a football field. Really, really impressive. They're out of Norway, but their US headquarters are here in Portland, surprisingly.
How
Um,
do you spell
and
Norbit?
yeah, Norbit. Uh, their products are made to be modular, and they're amazing. A lot of surveying, everything like that. They're small and super powerful, and to be honest with you, they're very expensive. But nonetheless, these we're pairing it up with one of our boat. The other boat we have, the single that Tab actually has been on, and they're gonna lease that boat out because of the fact that it eliminates so much other sound that they're able to get much clearer pictures. Um, it's worth checking out their website because the sonar stuff that they're utilizing is blowing my brain. They use different wavelengths so they can go in through different layers of sediment, the soft sediment on the top, and then they go with a different like wavelength, and like it's really, really amazing. And they can go all the way down to almost basement rock, which is insane to see that kind of stuff. So they're finding one for surveying, and this other side of like finding buried ships and planes and things like that, which is super cool. Like
You
being
know,
a treasure hunter.
not to interrupt, but there is no fish finder that works in Bristol Bay because of the sediment and the physiology of salmon. They have a very small air bladder, but I'm I will explore that a little bit.
No, check
But
them out. They're
yeah,
amazing.
but I'm going to have to sign off here, Chad. But thank you very much for this, and I'm looking forward to learning more. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I wanna head up there probably this summer. I'm gonna try to get together and come up and do some presentations, and hopefully maybe we might have a boat we can bring up too to kind of give everybody a little bit of taste, or or getting people down actually for some of the shows down here. So again, working with a couple other grants and pieces that are helping to get people to the boats as well, since we don't have a gigantic fleet as of yet. Just getting people on these boats is the biggest piece, not just for sales, but to know like where the future of this kind of technology is going. Um, a lot of people don't give a crap if it's electric or gas, they just want it to work. That's kind of where I live, and our boats work and the motors work really well, and they barely need any maintenance. So that's the piece I see. Instead of being it's a marketing play, be like, does it work well? That's all that matters to me. So
I did rent a Tesla recently and was very impressed with the the get up and go. And I'm guessing it
yeah, the instant torque is awesome and terrifying at the same time.
exactly. So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Well, you sold me. I think we need to buy one for the Sikuliak. Like that's our research
Oh,
vessel.
well, I'm not thinking of Super Kuliak, but
The harbor support dredge boat.
no, what we have in the Connex, our inflatable,
Our Zodiac.
yeah, our
A
Zodiac.
little, yeah, your rib boat.
Yeah, we have a rib that we just haven't
We've got a rib
used.
we've used for research in the past. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For
that'd
sure.
be sweet.
It's perfect for that. And like again,
He pays power on it. So, yeah.
A little bit big, I think. And
Oh, yeah. But you need a tender vessel for it. Like,
yeah.
hang off the davit, charge it while it's hanging. Like, yeah, it's perfect.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's perfect for it. And like again, we're going down as small as that 16, 17 foot Super Cub, which is definitely way on the smaller side of a working skiff versus
putting-
like
Are you guys putting the 300 horsepower on that or the 150?
yeah, just the single 300 on there. Again, knowing that they'll probably you can rip that thing all the way up to 300, but again, normalizing that it has the potential of that power, but it runs through the whole range. We have continuous at 150, and then also when you're putzing around and when you're using it as like a trolling motor, but you're able to get back and in and out of nasty seas. That's kind of what this lives. It's not you want a small motor to do small things. Like this motor can do everything if you ever need it to.
So is that your only size? Is the 300?
A 300 right now is our only size. We're coming next year. We're going to make a 150 that'll have, like I said, 75 continuous horsepower, which is kind of funny. We use horsepower, but Newton meters, like it's different per, like whatever you're trying to utilize it for. But let's just find out like how much energy is actually being used. Um, but it's yeah, again, we know that there's a use case. Somebody doesn't want to put a gigantic 300 horsepower, 350-pound motor on a 12-foot Zodiac. So that's just going to drown the boat. So again, knowing that there is specific cases where that smaller or getting paired 150s would be better for steering than having, or depends on the boat, than having one 300.
Yeah. I think there's a association of Alaska Harbor Masters. I can't remember exactly what they call their trade organization.
AAHPA, Alaska Association of Harbor Masters and Port Administrators.
Yeah. I think they would be, if you were going to get your vessels up and show them to somebody, I think that would be the group to show them to, because I think that I think those guys in aquaculture would be your two, like just slam dunk use cases.
I agree. Yeah, Charles actually went to the last AHPA meeting and chatted with a bunch of folks, but that's when we started talking about the infrastructure needs. We used Homer as an example port, and we talked about the demand on an electric outboard and what is available with shore power currently at the harbor, and if they increase that to 4 slips of electrical outboard need, what it would take and how long it would take to make a transformer to a lot for that. I don't remember it. It was a lot of electrical mumbo jumbo to me, but
I'm a back of the napkin electrical guy. I was more of a swinging a hammer and framing out stuff guy. Um, I call it the like I'll do it, but it's not. I used to be licensed and bonded and everything like that. To be like, can you put that lighting in? You have to say you did it, okay? Because I don't want to get in trouble here. But yeah, learning a lot about Launch Alaska, which is kind of the piece that Charles was doing, which is again based upon Homer and powering up Homer and figuring out what we can do for the infrastructure there. I literally was talking to Charles today. He's unfortunately no longer with the company, but he's still helping out and doing consulting on the side with us, which has been a huge help for me. Um, but yeah, I think that again, I need to head up there once the weather gets a little bit better, come see you guys, bounce around and just see if I can't get a boat that we can ship up there. Um, that's not necessarily a big dream. Once we get our next round of funding, that's something that's very possible for us, which is great. Especially if we take that, if we bring up that the hydro foil, that's the foil cat. Those things are amazing. And it's again, it'd be a perfect like whale watching or survey boat. It's a rib boat, so it's not a full aluminum work boat. It's made of a composite. But I mean, from the hydrodynamic work we've seen and with what kind of actual less friction we can get with that motor with that hull shape, we'll be able to get a lot of distance out of these motors, which is really cool.
Mhm. I do think focusing where you travel on like what Noah was saying, the high demand for like mariculture and harbor movements and short stuff. I think of like Kodiak because they're 99% hydro powered, right? It's all renewable energy there. Or like Southeast, Juneau, also 99 or 95% renewable. Places like that, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And then yeah, I think Homer and Seward would be really good. I think getting a boat out here to show to us would be very expensive, and people are
It's pretty high up there.
yeah during the summer.
During your 2 week summer, we can get up there. It'd be perfect.
Yeah.
We get a little bit of that in Portland, but I can only imagine what it's like up there. We're like, we got a month and a half or two of sun. It's been amazing. You guys like, we got 3 days. That's a great summer.
Go get it. You don't sleep.
You don't go
sleep. You
inside.
don't want to miss it at all. Like,
Yeah, you're sleeping outside, just all the mosquitoes. I can only imagine. Well, thanks, guys. Again,
You got one more question, Chad?
oh, bring it on. Bring it on.
Question, what kind of price on a shore-based, like if you put a charging station in the boat harbor, what kind of cost is that?
So with our partner, I've got some pricing that comes around it. If you're looking at like a gigantic, like three-phase DC charger, it's probably going to be around 90 to $100,000. When you're looking at some of these like ones that won't be full 250 amp, and you go down to something that would be more like a 50 to 60 amp, maybe an 80, you're looking at maybe like $40,000. Again, that's for the actual piece. So think about the actual mechanical work if they need to get any power down to the water. That's the whole working with contractors, that's where some of these companies that are the charging companies, like we work with Energy Spot and things like that, where they come into play with like a leasing program where it's more or less like they cover the infrastructure like cost of getting the power down, doing all that kind of stuff. And then versus being 15 cents per kilowatt hour, they charge you 30 cents per kilowatt hour and take that 15 cents off the top. Um, that's kind of like again the what I've seen some of the models coming out with all these new chargers, even the ones that are on the road down here in like in sunnier spots where they're driving uh EV vehicles everywhere. Like Tesla, all the Tesla chargers that we have that would be like in Washington, Oregon, and California and other spots, they are not owned by the say whatever gas station or parking lot. They lease that land and charge for the electrons. So it's a different type of like program, which I think it's great to get people into it. I think it also kind of you never own it, which is not one of my favorite things in the world. Um, so yeah, I mean that's kind of a rough answer to what you have or what you had is, the pricing can go from 100K down to, 15 for one of the really small ones, but or 10K, but understanding, you have to have the whatever power that's coming to it has to be built, coded, and water protected as well. If a king tide comes in and doesn't go up and down with the actual with the dock or something like that, you'll be running into something pretty spicy.
But yeah, if you want to get people to use your outboards, you'd think you'd want to have places locally we can charge them, you know.
No, exactly. And that's what I said earlier. It's like talking about the chicken or the egg. I think that we're gonna have the boats ready much before the infrastructure comes into play, but we are working hand in hand with a lot of different ports, cities, et cetera, to ensure, like you're saying, like I would prefer to do that process and make sure that they have something that we can actually charge the boats with, and then you bring in the boats, versus this other way where it's going to be a slower charging process. But um, if you build it, they will come, I think is the saying.
You gotta start
So
somewhere.
Yeah,
exactly.
you gotta build the boat while you're driving it, sort of thing.
Exactly.